Welcome to Podcast This Escape, the podcast where we talk about the escape room that we escaped from in the previous episode of this podcast.
Just the two of us today.
It is just the two of us. We had so much fun having David and Steve on to play through the room.
But as you can imagine, they're busy people.
Yeah, it was in the middle of a very, very busy day for both of them, so they weren't able to stay for the post-show, but that's fine, because we're here,
now
and really we're
get
the
to
ones you love the
judge.
most. Danny, I thought that went really well.
I am so relieved at how smoothly it went. If you're a Patreon donor, you'll have now access to our playtest audio. I was very worried when I had written this game because I wrote the vast majority of this game quite some time ago, and then I had to put it on hold to write the next one because we had recordings in a row, and I figured I don't need to quite finish that last one. I've basically done all of it. So I wrote the next room, which ended up being the previous room, the cemetery room.
Yes.
And then came back to write up my notes properly for this casino room. And then I went, oh no, these puzzles don't make sense. What have I done?
It was interesting because you were very worried coming into the playtest, but
and
honestly,
I tried haphazardly to fix them, and somehow the fixes worked, even though honestly, I couldn't remember half of the things.
There were a lot of typos in the playtest.
Yeah.
And like certain things where it's like, for example, we had the puzzle in this one that was like the mahjong puzzle, right? We went to the cards, we went to the roulette, we took the opposites of the face cards, we took those to the mahjong.
That was the one that didn't make any sense in my book notes, and I had to change.
YY, BP, WY, all that sort of stuff. Nothing in that changed. It was exactly the same, except that
I had accidentally made multiple mahjong tiles represented by the letter B.
Yeah,
I had
there was
blue
a brown,
and brown and black.
Yeah, there was a brown and a black and a blue. And so it was like, but that's just like a visual typo. Like the puzzle made perfect sense. We just had to be like, wait a minute, that's ambiguous. Other than that, it was the flow of the puzzle was great.
And then for some reason, instead of the dashes to represent the name Barry in Barry
Fernando... Oh yeah, you'd written for Barnles?
Yeah, in my head, I'd had Bernard in my head, and yet somehow still highlighted the correct letters.
Yeah,
it just didn't fit the name Barry.
But other than that, like, everything was very similar.
And so
it had a perfect flow.
Yeah, and so then again, when I went, okay, let's fix all these typos, let's fix this mahjong puzzle, I did that, then I left it for a few days because we were doing other recordings and stuff. Came back today, like, 10 minutes before we started the recording, I went, hey, Billy, can you check this? I never actually double-checked it to make sure it works now.
And it was fine. It was perfectly fine. We had a couple of, like, technical issues with things during the recording, but the actual room was fine.
I was very pleasantly surprised.
I really liked this. I also liked that when David and Steve got into it, I felt bad that we had to kind of be on a fairly strict time limit because, again, like, we made sure that we got through quickly.
Yeah. But
what I meant is, like, they were having so much fun early on, like, being in character and being in the space, and I was like, oh no,
sad that we had
they're going to have so much fun and we're going to have to pull them back.
I could have sat there and just listening to them be casino spies for hours.
We could have just been like, look, for the first hour, David, if you just start like talking to everybody in character and just do that for an hour, it'll be great, then we'll get on to the puzzles.
That's why I was very happy at the very end where I said, hey, you've just got to needle these guys for a little bit. Just poke them into hating you. And I was very glad that they paused for a second trying to think of something, and then it was all in.
It was just a nice flow,
That's what I wanted.
I really enjoyed this. Now, usually we would have our guests and we'd ask them if they had any moments that they felt particularly good or accomplished. Danny, did you have any moments that you thought for either David or Steve was like a standout moment that they did very well?
Standout characteristics of them. Steve, he was good at the observations of the little things like that. Like he noticed when the fruits were different numbers and stuff like that.
Yes.
He noticed, it's the colors of the mahjong tiles that is a thing to pay attention to. And David, his mind was going at 1,000,000 miles per hour of solving.
Yes, yeah, he was very solution oriented, which is kind of the perfect pair. Is one person goes, I've got these pieces and I've organized them into the blocks. This is where the puzzle is, and this is what the puzzle is. Which is an incredibly important escape room skill, right? To be able to identify what connects to what and how the puzzles are sort of shaped. And then once that shape was laid out, every time David would be like, great,
looks at it
and
goes,
here it is. Boom,
I've
boom,
got
boom,
this.
They're the two sides of the solving of escape room puzzles coin. You need to be able to construct and find what the puzzle is and then actually do the puzzle. And they work brilliantly as a pair for that, I think.
Yeah, so I wasn't trying to hone in on specific moments of that, but just the overall feel of what are your strengths? That's what I was getting from it. And Did you notice any specific moments?
I think maybe I thought Steve shone very well getting over to the once we had banana 50k, melon 20k, he was immediately just like, great, bananas are worth 50, melons are
That's
worth
true.
20.
He started
so
out doing the
therefore, on
Facebook
that middle
maths.
one, we get, and like he was good at getting into that Facebook maths kind of
And
moment
knowing the one
and
to
starting
look
to
at.
break things down. So once he was there, David jumped straight in and started doing the next one in the same way. But I thought he was really good at, again, same thing, finding that puzzle and what it meant.
That's fair.
David had a lot of nice solutions. I believe he did. Who noticed that the boxing match fit into the ATM?
I think
line?
that was David who got that
Yeah,
first.
that was nice as well. And that one's a really cool one because if you didn't look at the images already at home, the thing that's so nice about that is it isn't just about the number of letters that each of those has. It's not just like that you could count them up and they match. It's that the layout matches, which is very cool. So the number or like the way it is presented matches the way it is presented on the ATM. And David did really well at not falling into the trap that I did, which was
Going horizontal?
He just trusted his gut. And when you trust your gut, it's like left side, right side, banana 50k, melon 20k. I started writing banana malo, and I went, that can't be anything. Banana malo is nothing. I have to move on. So that was nice. They did that. They recognized those patterns really well.
I really liked I suppose, the yes-anding. They're actors, of course they're going to yes-and. But I say, oh, can we lift this ATM? And I was like, okay, so here's what happens when we try to lift the ATM. And they just went, oh, yep, that's exactly how it would go. I get that.
Yes, it was nice. Like, sometimes people get really into solving a puzzle and they forget, like, not forget, but they don't then care about being the person in the scene. And they were very good, both of them, at maintaining, like, let me bring this back, make a little comment about me in the space. And that's fun to listen to. It makes it enjoyable
David
for the
was
audience.
the detective. He was a cocky detective.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
I loved it.
It was really nice. I enjoyed it. Is there anything that they did differently than I did?
Okay,
the flow was
exactly. They are such bad luck flow wise. They started out great. I went, oh, they've gone to the ATM and then over to Jamie, perfect. And then they somehow hit everything that obviously it's all important, but right at the start it meant that they just got to look at everything but weren't able to finish any puzzles in particular, which is just bad luck.
Whereas
of how the
for
flow
me,
goes.
I did the other way around where I went like, I know that I want to get into the VIP room, so I went straight to the VIP room, started there, and then because that mentions the game, I went to do all the games and didn't get down to Jamie. And I think that may have been sort of the same thing they did, which is that when they went to Jamie, Jamie was like, well, you don't have any chips, maybe you should go play the games. So they were following Jamie's dialogue back to the games, and I followed the VIP note over to the games. So I skipped Jamie and they skipped the VIP door. So there's a little bit and maybe that's something that if we were running this over and over again for 20 people, 30 people, hundreds of people, we would go, okay, let's try and make sure they get to Jamie and the VIP
Let's see
door
what
early.
can do this flow.
Because each one is a good starting point, but each one sort of points you back off to the games rather than to each other. But if you have them both, if Jamie's like, you should go check out the VIP room, that's where people want you, except you'd have to re-justify some of that in the real world.
It is still the interesting mix, though, because yes, from a puzzle perspective, they are leading you away from each other. In a roleplay perspective, you are a detective. Your goal is to get into that VIP room. The VIP room and the person at the counter are the natural things to go with.
Yeah, but I think they are both natural things to start with. But once you start with them, you're like, no, I've done the start, and then you just start. And I think maybe that happened to both of us. I loved that listening to them do the blackjack numbers.
Oh, so much
because
the
I
same
have
way
the
as
same
here.
stuff because I was like, they went JK 10 7 8 queen, and I've got that written down. They were like, okay, well let's add those hands together, and the next
I can't
thing I
believe
have
they
written
got
down,
A and C the exact same way
is
that you
20,
did.
17, 18. They didn't then go TQR
No.
of finding what those would be just as letters of the alphabet. But that's I think just a thing that I do out of habit now. But then they went straight to A and C, and then straight to BBB, BP. WB, and then to the proper version of the face cards. It was exactly the same flow. So it's nice to see that is kind of must be a little bit inherent in the design, or at least we think the same way when we're solving puzzles. So it was nice because that was exactly the same way, step by step, that I looked at that puzzle.
It is interesting. I think what I need to write into it, I don't even know how, is that you can go from blackjack to roulette to mahjong and then get stumped at mahjong if you haven't done the slot machines, and some sort of inbuilt thing that says, if you've got this far, but this is inscrutable now, you're pretty sure that you've done everything right, it just doesn't mean anything to you yet.
Yeah.
That is a reasonable spot to have made it to.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's one of those ones where I think that just happens. Like, you get to the end of the puzzle path, and you're like, well, I've got this code now. There's nothing to do with this code. I'm just going to have to shelve that.
True. It's just hard to completely wipe your thoughts of that one and go,
Yeah.
okay, shelve, next thing.
Yeah, because you are following a thing. You're like, well, what's the next step? I must have
Yeah.
the next step. It's interesting.
We do. It is good. It's always, you want, in a lot of rooms, it can be good to have an initial puzzle that you solve quickly and that you feel good about, especially if you haven't done too many rooms. It's a good motivation builder. But in ones like these, where it's a bit of a slow build, they found everything in the room first, but then it was solve, 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 solve immediately, all in a row, which is a good, fun way to end things as well.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and that was, especially we were looking, because we were worried about timing for this episode. And I was watching the clock and be like, oh, you know, they've only solved like one puzzle and we're 48 minutes in, but they'd set everything else up. So once they solved that, it really was just, all right, now we need 30 seconds to solve the next puzzle. We need 2 minutes to solve the next puzzle. We need 1 minute to solve the next puzzle. And it just cascaded really well. So, and I think that is probably when you are playing a game, I think that's the best possible sort of momentum.
Fair.
I think when it is the best feeling, right? Is to slowly build and be confused and get worried about whether or not you're going to finish and looking at the time and looking and building and then just going yes. I think it's great for both the audience listening and for the players in terms of momentum. We don't always have that in a room, and sometimes we don't want that, right? For variety, it's nice to break it up and sometimes end with a big puzzle moment or solve little ones and then get stuck up. But I think like if you could only do one room and none others, like that would be the momentum that you want. Like if you can only ever have one type of momentum, I think that's what you would want. Do you design ever, like when you're designing them, do you think like I'd like it to be that way, or does it just some rooms happen that way and some rooms don't?
No, it absolutely just happens. I have no idea. I probably could notice a pattern because typically when I design mine, I do it semi-linear. I usually have two different starting points or just some sort of divergence, and then there is one choke point where you need to have solved the puzzles coming from both ends to get there.
Yeah.
And depending on where that choke point is in the room, I'm sure that would make itself obvious. Like if that choke point is very late in the room, then that I'm sure would feel like once you hit that, then everything cascades quickly. And so you can tell when the cascading quick puzzles is going to start by where that choke point is.
Yeah, that's fair.
I haven't noticed consciously.
I think it's one of those things, right? If you're thinking about room design, people talk about linear rooms, non-linear rooms, and whether one's better than the other, right? And I think sometimes because it is more complex, people get obsessed with like things should be non-linear. Non-linear is awesome. I think the solution, the design process that you go through is the perfect version.
It's most comfortable for me.
Because linear is good in a way that it makes sense as people. It's got progression. Progression is fun. You want progression. The idea of basically not non-linear, where things are just in places and you solve a whole bunch of them, but basically multi-track is I think, for all escape rooms, the best sort of design philosophy. And I think it leads to the most enjoyable rooms. With exceptions, I'm sure. I'm sure there are some people who are like, this room's completely non-linear, and I'm like, that's brilliant. Or people who are like, this is my multi-track room, and I'm like, no, please don't. But I think in general, the idea of like, there are 2, maybe if you wanted a bigger room with lots of people, 3, like, tracks, and they all lead down, and they sort of converge or swap, is the most fun, because you get the benefits of linear, which is things make sense. You get a feeling of progression. You can follow a story. If you want to build like narrative into your puzzle, you have then control over the pacing of that information. Those are all brilliant.
It's how frustrating it would be if you have a completely multi-linear room, but you need to have looked at all of the lines in order to get a full picture of the story.
Yeah.
By the end of it, that's going to feel a little weird if some of your teammates
did
some.
Right. So you want like your own little tracks. And I think for this one, because it's a smaller
all in service
scale
of the one line.
Yes, yeah, right. So that kind of, if you ever are designing, and I'm sure most people who would say they do non-linear rooms do multi-linear rooms. Multi-linear is probably the better term that most people are actually implying when they say non-linear. But it is good. Multi-linear is a perfect sort of design philosophy, and it worked really well in this one.
Converging multi-linear.
Converging multi-linear, yes. Because if it's 2 separate, then it's just like some people are like, I missed half the room.
Yeah.
So converging, and even if they don't have to converge and become one line, just like moments where they come together and then split off again
They could.
it's very helpful, and it's enjoyable. It's a good design philosophy. For anyone who's out there thinking, I want to design escape rooms, that is a good way to do it.
Yeah, typically, if we're doing an escape room, I'm never going to judge the room when they say, oh, this one's linear or this one's non-linear.
No.
I'm never going to judge it. I'm never going to opt to do or not do a room based on that. But yeah, the idea that there are just issues with both. You don't want them to be too scattered, and so because that can lead to real difficulty about knowing what's supposed to go with what. You need to have the lines very clear if you have separated linear. You want them to come together at some point so that you feel like there's a cohesive story going on, even if it's not like narrative story, but just puzzle story. It's the same thing. And, linear can have the issue of just feeling like you are going from one thing to the next thing to the next thing, which sometimes can feel a little bit artificial. And depending on team size and stuff, it can lead to people just not having things to do.
That is one of the biggest things, is when I see linear, I would never think I don't want to do this room.
I would think
but I will
that's a
often
two-person room.
Yeah, should I do this with 2 or 3 people, not 4 or 5 people? Because sometimes it can just be, we're on to the next step, and there's only room for one pair of hands, and we have 4 people sort of waiting until they're done.
It's also difficult in a linear room because a linear room typically means there is one thing to do at any given point. And at the very beginning of an escape room especially, I can find that difficult because I want to explore everything and hope that everything that I'm seeing is relevant and could be something. But at least at that point in time, that's not going to be true.
True.
That's a different headspace.
It is at least nice. Like we did a room recently that was very linear, but also you could sort of set up a lot of future puzzles by exploring and going, okay, I know this is the puzzle we're doing, but if we're looking around, I see this, I see this, I see this, I see this. And so that when you get the next puzzle, you've pre-solved it, even though you didn't know what the solution was going to be, because you're like, wait a minute, this thing, well, I've seen a version of that thing here and a version of that thing here. Maybe we just go dunk, 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 and like, you can...
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's usually good, well-designed linear rooms still reward puzzling with future progress.
This is fair.
So, back to the room that we did.
Oh, right,
rather
that thing.
Rather than just specific, going so wide. We look back at this room. Hey, they're not here. Let's talk about how poorly they did. Ooh, is there anything they did wrong? I don't think so, actually. I think they did very well.
Yeah, it was fine.
There's nothing to complain about. Like,
nope.
Do you think...
Oh, no, they forgot to say a direction at one point when they were putting in the directional log.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he skipped it down. What a fool.
It was a left. God.
So obviously, David and Steve they'd listened to an episode before.
Mm-hmm.
And
a Christmas episode. Which was a foolish decision.
Which is a hard one to get into. But do you think there's anything that, like, if we had people on who were, like, Escape This Podcast veterans, is there anything that was, like, majorly different in the way you would play it? Like, one thing I noticed is I love that Steve checked the door.
Yeah.
That was his moment of, wait a minute, let's check the door. I love it when someone checks the door.
Because there was clearly a mental, I wouldn't say a mental block, but there was something in their heads of character-wise of, well, we need to get into the VIP room. I know we can't get in there yet. And then he went, wait, but is it still worth looking at?
That was nice as well.
That was a nice way of processing that.
I think the one, like, telltale thing, a sign of, like, people who have played or haven't is their expectation of when you're going to jump in. Like, there was that thing, a bit of like, so can we go to the M and, like, maybe take out $10,000?
They could have kept going forever.
And you have to be like, wait, please, allow me.
I was sad having to interrupt them for pacing. Because, I would have happily let them keep going.
Mm. But other than that, like, they did very well. They kind of very inherently got the feel, right?
Oh, for sure.
Let me describe this. What about this? Give me some new information about that. And it worked out well.
When David got too excited about puzzle solving, his descriptions of things went down.
That is
he
true.
wanted those answers.
Do you think it's easier coming in for the first time and having a more image-heavy room? Do you think that makes it easier for guests or harder? Because this was a fairly image-heavy room. But we had 2 new guests the episode before, and it was an image-light room. But I think images are nice. Images are... People know how to look at that and see that and be like, oh, great, this is like a little self-contained puzzle. I can just look and solve. I do think they're helpful for first-time players.
You might be right, though. I'll keep that in mind. The other thing I would say, if we had people who were massive Escape This Podcast veterans coming on, obviously they'd have checked all the doors first.
Yes,
which
true.
would have put a different spin on the going cards to roulette. They would have been able to do that entire blackjack mahjong thing, getting all the way to the PPBY, whatever it is.
Now you say that, but also I'm a pretty veteran Escape This Podcast
And
player,
you
and I
didn't
didn't
check the door.
until quite
Yeah,
late. I did
wild.
check it, but not. I knew I had to check it. It just took me a while.
I mean, you checked the other door first.
Oh, of course I
You
checked
checked
that
one
door.
of
That
the
doesn't
doors.
count. Like, I knew to check it. It just still, I think pacing-wise, I probably did it in about the same place.
You know what? I think one of the other things that happened was that I noticed. So, for example, with this automatic door sliding puzzle, the emergency evacuation procedure thing.
Mhm.
So they read that. They noticed the bolded words, paid attention to those. And then when they weren't sure if they got everything, they went back, they read the entire message again.
Yes.
So not like having the knowledge that when I do these games, it's you got those bolded words, you got that information, the rest of it is junk.
Yes, yeah, you're right. Because that was my thing. I read the message, found the bolded notes, like, great, the message is purely the medium through which these
Yep.
bolded words are described.
Why do you think these instructions were so
Yeah.
ridiculous?
The rest of the message, I would have never reread that original message. But
Yeah.
then when they were a bit stuck, they went back to maybe it's the original message. that's relevant.
Exactly. Maybe
Which
there's
is
something in there.
by itself a very reasonable thing
Of
to think.
course.
But it's just like I know your language of puzzles. I'm like, if you've hidden a message in something, the original thing is not going to matter. And I think once maybe or twice you kind of had the original matter as well, and it threw me off completely. I was like, how was I to know that? I discounted that. I'd crossed it out. That's an interesting one.
You know what? Sometimes I'm mean or sometimes I'm bad. Who knows?
Yeah, or like there was something to do. I think there was a similar sort of flavor of difference in how they were interacting with Jamie's note. Like again, like for me,
Yeah.
Jamie's note, I was like, oh, different angle, that's important, and someone has your tell, that's important. The rest is fluff.
Yep.
The rest is framework for the hidden clues. Whereas again, for them, that wasn't as obvious, and so they kind of kept the whole note in mind. They would often go back and reread the whole note again. Incredibly reasonably, of course you would. But from an experience of playing your games, it's like, no, I know what to discount.
Exactly.
It's an interesting one. And I wonder how much, for people who've listened to a lot, that would be just as obvious. They'd be like, sure,
You do
discount
that in real escape rooms. Well, I definitely do that in real escape rooms. You get something written. I am one of those people who, while I love reading, when you're on a time limit, your actual comprehension ability goes out the window a bit, and suddenly reading is a bit of a frustrating endeavor. So I will read. I will definitely read it, but I am searching for the important bit that's hidden there so that I can discard the rest and stop thinking.
Yeah, I want to just read the first letter of every sentence. I don't want to read the whole sentence. Yeah, that is true. Well, look, I had a lot of fun with it. I think they had a lot of fun with it.
It came up
I think you had a
pretty
lot of fun with
well.
it. I hope the audience had a lot of fun
I'm
with it.
worried. I've been pretty happy with my first two rooms this season. Where am I going to go next? I'm going to kill it.
People listening at
I'm
home,
going to kill it.
do you hear what I have to deal with? Dani has had 2 good rooms in a row that went well, so she is inherently saying, well, this is a terrible thing, now I'm worried about what the future... She can't just enjoy her successes. I have to deal with this every day. Dani,
I'm
it was
super
good.
enjoying
you had 2
it,
good rooms.
but I know what the theme
Stop
of my
being
next
worried.
room is, and I am concerned.
Dani's next room is themed Bad Escape Room.
No, we've done that before.
Have we done that or have people done
Okay,
that? Our guests have done
I'm
that.
sure I've mentioned this before, like way back, season 1, episode 10, we were having the Roomscape Divas come on. They were the escape room celebrities.
Yeah.
And I was really nervous and I went, oh, I really want to do a room that's themed about being a bad escape room. Oh, no, but I can't do that. They know everything about escape rooms. I'm not ready for this. And then I still haven't done it, but we have played through guest rooms like that before. And
I feel like
love
we
it.
had one season where every second guest game master was like, I'm going to do you a bad escape
And
room.
it was awesome.
And they were all fantastic.
I love it.
We had like an entire season where it's like, look, half of us are going to be pirates and half of us are going to be bad escape rooms, and you're going to have to deal with it. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you do want to check more of what David and Steve are doing, there are links to their Twitter bios and places you can find what they do in the show notes below.
Just pretty
So go
much
and-
jump into anything in the DC universe now, and they'll be
if
there.
you watch anything in DC, you'll find at
Dang,
least David
They're
somewhere.
everywhere.
Yeah. So I hope. So thank you so much for listening. This is a thank you that they cannot hear, but thank you again to David and Steve for coming on. It was lovely to have them both. And if you wanted to help support the show,
Listen to this
they
one.
hate us. They'll never
I know they'll listen to their actual episode. They might listen to this as well.
They'll refuse. They would never listen to this. For people who are listening at home, if you want to help support the show, honestly, spread the word. It's the best way to help support the show. Like, go and tell a friend, tell someone you know, to someone you don't know. Go onto internet forums and recommend it. Leave a review. It really is legitimately the best way to help. People take podcasts by recommendation, so recommend. Also, If you want to help support the show in a more concrete, numerical way, you can sign up for the Patreon. Anybody who signs up for the Patreon can appear as an NPC in one of our episodes.
Yeah, you can be hardened criminal gang members like Andrew, Tom, and Sally Jane. Thank you so much. And of course, Jamie, lesser criminal, still a great character.
Yeah, so thank you so much. And also, for $5 donors, there's bonus audio. You can hear our playtest, you can hear our 2-minute mysteries, and any other weird bonus stuff that we do when there isn't a playtest to do. So go and listen to that. There's heaps of it. There's a new episode every week for Patreon donors. So check it out. And there's badges for $10 donors and other fun stuff like that. So thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for running the room, Dani.
Thank you so much for all of the technical stuff that I don't know how to do and would be way too lazy to learn.
Thank you all so much.
Could sound less sarcastic. Jeez.